Chapter 11 Bobo Brazil Meets the Sheik. The next time I woke up, it was just starting to get light, and somehow I was in the front seat with Mama, was in the back. When my eyes got used to where they were, I saw Daddy holding the steering wheel with one hand and resting the other one on the mirror outside the car. The green lights from the dashboard made his face look puffed up and tired, but he was smiling to himself. I knew what woke me up this time. The Ultra Glide was stuck. And as we drove, the record was saying, and don't forget who's tech, and don't forget who's tech, and don't forget who's tech, and don't forget who's tech. I started to say something to Dad, but he looked pretty happy, and before I could open my mouth, he recorded the record hypnotized me back to sleep. The next time I woke up, it was a bright day, and Joey was in the front seat drooling all over me. The altar guide was saying, and don't forget who's tech. Dad must have heard me breathe different because he looked down at me and said, "Well, well, well, look who's decided to come back to life." Hi, Dad. Are we there yet? Oh, no. Et tu, brute? You were my last hope. With Bi and Joey and your mother popping up every few minutes asking, "Are we there yet?" It's been like a stuck record. Dad, it is a stuck record. Dad seemed to notice the record player for the first time. Ah, well, Kenny, I'm afraid it's more than a stuck record. Something isn't working right. He lifted the arm off the record and looked in the back seat at Mama, who was asleep. But let's keep that between you and me, okay? Sure. How long before we stop? We'll be at Grandma Sands before you know it. Joey had been listening to us. Daddy, that's what you said last time. How much longer? I'm sick of this old car. Not too much longer, honey. I'll stay up and keep you company, Dad, I said. Yeah, me too, Joey added. I know who conked out first. I don't know who conked out first, but anything about coming into Alabama, I don't think any of us, especially Dad. We'd been in the car so long that Dad had started growing a beard, little tiny hairs coming out of his face. Most of them were black, but 10 of them were white. Dad looked real bad. He was still smiling to himself, but now instead of a real smile, it looked like he was gripping his teeth together to get ready to bite something. The worst thing, though, was that he had turned the radio on and was listening to country and western music. Ugh. He was tapping his hand and the steering wheel like he was really enjoying it. Dad, do you know what you're listening to? Dad decided to cut up. Kenneth, I've been thinking about having all of our names changed to country names when we get back to Michigan. I'll be Clem, you be Homer, and will be Billy Bob, and Joey will be Daisy May, and your mother will be, well, I guess your mother's name will just stay Willona. I don't think we're going to find more country name than that one, do you? Me and Dad cracked up. Mama's head popped up from the back seat, and she said in a super southern sound, "Okay, Clem. I hopes when us get to Birmingham, you can splash these here babies, Granny. How come you turned them into little zombies from sitting in this car for so long?" Dad laughed. Now, Alona, you know it hasn't been that bad. In fact, I'm going to admit something that I probably shouldn't. Mama rubbed her eyes and put her hand on top of her head. You gonna do this admitting in front of little Homer? Hee haw? Hey haw? Everybody started waking up and stretching and scratching. Mama kept teasing Dad. And what about some vittles, Clem? The sun has been up for hours, and you ain't even been out to check them trap lines to see if we've gonna get some coon pie for breakfast. Dad yelled out, "Yeehaw!" And then he said, "Haven't any of you wondered why you've been sleeping like a little herd of angels?" Byron said, "Like there was anything to keep anybody awake in this car full of squares. Anyway, Dad said, I'ma let the cat out of the bag. I've been using two kinds of mind power to keep this trip going smooth. First, after a while, I started locking into the road, and there was nothing to it. Just me, the road, and the brown bomber. All turned into one hum. And as long as I listened to that hum, everything was fine. My biggest worry was you, Willona. I knew after a while you'd figure out that I wasn't going to stop. And you gotta admit, you were good and salty about it at first, right? You know I still am, Mama said, upset because of her notebook planning had been wasted. But Willona, you gotta admit, once you figured out how much money we'd save by not stopping, you went right along with it. Mama kinda grunted, not saying yes, but not saying no. Dad cleared his throat and rubbed his hands over his little stubbles that were coming out of his chin. We all knew this was a sign that he was going to start acting a fool. He tested Mama to see how mad she really was and decided it was safe to play around. Yep, he said, rubbing his chin until it made a scratchy sawing sound. 18 big hours in a row. Nearly 1,000 miles I had a load to deliver, and he punched the air with his fist, and I delivered it. It's just like the great song I heard a couple miles back. Big Daddy was a truck driving man. And I'm not going to lie and say it was easy. There were many times I wanted to stop. But then those times came, and I just think of my old pal Joe Epinosa driving all the way to Texas without stopping, and I keep my foot on the tank. In the tank. Oh, yeah? There were times when your mother was giving me looks like she was going to kill me for the first. I slowed down, but I just kept smiling at her and kept my big brown bomber chugging along. I'd I'd tell her, "You're right, sweetheart. We'll just go a little bit farther." And you kids, you talk about some pathetic, tortured looking little faces. 18 hours in a car can age a kid 40 years. Yeah, I swear I've been looking in the rearview mirror wondering where my babies were and where these three bad dispositioned, sour faced, middle aged midgets came from. But your sorry little mugs couldn't stop me either. In spite of all the crying and bawling and moaning and wailing and gnashing of teeth, I kept pushing. Dad must have been real tired. He hardly ever talked this much straight. I gotta admit, the other trick I used to, but I can't take full credit for this one. I hoped Dad was going to say that I helped him by keeping him company, but no. Some of the credit has to go to Scientific Popular. That was the name of the magazine that came to Dad in the mail every month. It was a real cool covers, and they were always drawings of smiling white people and standing next to the cars with wings, or sitting on private submarines, or eating a whole meal in one little pill. The covers were real interesting, but the insides were real boring. Yep, the old Scientific Popular. They had an article about sound frequencies, and they said that certain sounds could cause certain effects on all living things, even weird Watsons. It said that the sound of one of those vacuum cleaners can put a baby to sleep, and it works. Mama laughed a little. It was strange for all of us to see Dad talking so much. When the first when we first hit Alabama and had a bunch of miles to go, and you kids were popping up like prairie dogs and crying and saying, "How much longer?" And Mommy, make him stop. And it's that Birmingham over there. And all I did was use that vacuum trick. I started buzzing like a Hoover vacuum, and you guys dropped off in reverse seniority. Joey dropped, then Kenneth, then Daddy, cool, and even you, Alona. Shoot. You guys were out cold before the state line on. I threw a blanket over you in the back seat, and then even those whines and whimpers and moans you guys were making didn't bother me. And you, Alona, once I got buzzing, the only thing that was coming out of your mouth was drool. Is that what that sound was? Mama asked. I thought you were driving so long 'cause you lost your mind. I'm still not sure you haven't. Everybody woke up, but it was a fake wake up. We were all soon back to sleep, even though it was morning. The next thing I remember, I was waking up in the back seat and Mama was saying real southern, "Babies, we're home." Mama was honking the horn of the brown bomber like she was crazy. I raised my head out of the seat and looked at what Mama was calling home, and I couldn't believe it. Birmingham looked a lot like Flint. There were real houses, not little log cabins, all over the places, and great, big, beautiful trees. Most of all, there was the sun. Me and Joetta and Byron folded ourselves into Alabama's heat, and it was like we all remembered at once that we were going to finally see what Grandma Sands really looked like. We all bunched up together by Mama's door. But she didn't get out. She was still honking the horn like a nut. We had to cover our ears. Dad said, "Nothing's changed." The door of the regular old house opened. Me and Joey had never seen Grandma Sands in our lives. Byron said he could remember that she was the meanest, ugliest person in the world, but he was probably lying. He was only 4 the last time Mama and Dad were here. Byron said that he had nightmares for a couple weeks after they left Alabama 10 years ago. All the weird Watsons had real cool, good imaginations, but none of us was ready for what came out that door of that house. I was expecting a troll. I thought Grandma Sands would be the bigger than Dad. I thought she'd be foaming at the mouth like she had rabies. I remember a couple of years ago how Mama had cried and cried when someone called from Alabama and told us that Grandma Sands had a little stroke. So I knew she walked with a cane now. I'd imagine the cane would be as big as a tree trunk and crows and owls and lizards living in it. What came out was a teeny weeny old woman that looked just like Mama would if she shrank her down about 5 sizes and sucked all the juice out of her. Grandma Sands waved a tiny little skinny stick in the air and said, "Where you all been doing here today? You ain't supposed to be here till Monday." Man, if you think Mama could talk Southern style, whew, you should hear Grandma Sands. Mama was blubbering and smiling and covering her mouth with both hands and ran straight up to the porch, nearly broke the little old woman in half. "How you doing, Mama?" she cried on the woman's shoulder. Then she held Grandma Sands out to look at. "You look so good." Boy, Mama can lie when she wants to. "Y'all, come on over here and give your granny a hug," my Southern style mother said. Me and Joey and Byron shuffled out of the little crowd, and we all got through pushing each other forward. Was the front I was the front and had to go in on the porch to hug Grandma Sands first. I tried to be real careful with her. She was just a little taller than me and skinnier than anything I'd ever seen alive. I could see her brown scalp right through her curly silver hair. Grandma Sands squeezed me hard and cried all over me. She wiped a bunch of tears away and twisted up her hand and blinked a couple times before she looked at me. She was so short, she didn't even have to look down. She tried to say something, but she couldn't talk. She just stuck her bottom lip out and nodded her head up and down a couple times, then pulled me back in and squeezed me like crazy. Mama slapped the back of my head and said, "Kenneth Bernard Watson, you best quit acting so silly and give your grandma a good hug." I squeezed her a little. I smell like baby powder came out of her when I did. I really think I could feel her lungs when I touched her back. I don't know what got Joey started, but she was off to the races with her tears. She was the only one who'd practiced what she was going to say to Grandma Sands, and she sniffed a couple times and said, "Hi, Grandma Sands. It's a real pleasure to meet you." You could only half understand what she was saying. She was blubbering so much. Grandma Sands matched Joey for tear for tear. They squeezed each other for a while. Then Grandma Sands got her little squeaky voice back and said to Mama, Lord, Lona, if this child ain't you, look at this baby, just as pretty and sweet as you. Mama and Joey grinned like two nuts. Byron was next. This was what I dreamed about. These were the two meanest, most evil people I'd ever known. I knew only one of them was going to come out of this alive. There was going to be a battle, something like Godzilla met King Kong, or if Frankenstein met Dracula, or like when the champion wrestler Bob Brazil meets the Sheik. I'd imagine that for a week or two after we got to Flint, get a phone call from Alabama with the winner of the big battle on the other end. If it was Byron, he'd talk kind of cool and low out of the corner of his mouth and say, "Shoot, man, you better come get this old chick. I ate her alive." Grandma Sands won the battle. You'd have to hold the phone away from your ear while she shouted, "Lona, you call this a bad child? This a little saint ready to come back north and go to Sunday school and scrub y'all floors." But soon as I saw Grandma's hands, I knew Byron would destroy this poor woman. I was even afraid Mama might decide not to leave him in Alabama. Byron walked up to the porch, cool, kind of bent over and gave Grandma Sands a hug. Grandma Sands squeezed him hard. "Lona, what you teach these babies up north? Don't they know how to give one a proper hug?" She held Byron by the arms, looked at him from the top to the bottom. "You grew up to be a fine looking boy. You so punny. When you were born, you nearly worried us crazy. You got strong, too." She slapped Byron's arms, and he kind of laughed. Grandma Sands reached up and ran her wrinkly old hand over Byron's head. "Whew, a little short hair on the hair, but you're going to be just fine. What do you think, Vi?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good, good. See, there's lots of things you can do down here. Mr. Robert ain't much help as he used to be. So all them things he used to do, you can do now." Mama said, "Mr. Who? Mr. Who?" Dad came up to the porch, got a ton of hugs too, and Grandma Sands pulled everybody together. Her little arms could only get around one person at a time. But as the weird Watson stood there, with some of us laughing, some of us crying, and some of us looking cool, it felt like we were all wrapped up in a big ball. Grandma Sands kept saying, "My family, my beautiful family," except with that southern accent that kept weeping and sounded like she was saying "family." Finally, the crowd started to breaking up, and Grandma Sands, "Now, what I'm going to feed y'all, I wasn't expecting you till Monday. Me and Mr. Robert usually just have leftovers on Sunday, but I guess if I'll go down to Job's and pick up some things, we can have chicken tonight. You good on following directions, Byron?" "Huh?" By's face got twisted up. "What?" Grandma Sam's voice popped like one of those big brown grocery bags snapped open. By looked surprised and said, "I mean, huh, ma'am? Are you good at following directions? Job's is a good little walk." I said, "He can follow directions real good, Grandma Sands. He's not as dumb as he looks." I shut up real quick and wished I hadn't said anything. When Grandma Sands looked at me, she said, "Lona, maybe there's two who should be spending the summer down here with me, with their granny." Everybody started going inside this ugly little house. Mama sounded worried. "Mama? Who was Mr. Robert?" Grandma Sands laughed, just like a wicked witch of the West, and said, "Oh, honey, we gotta talk. You just be patient. And soon's he gets up, I want you all to meet him." "Soon's he gets up? Oh, Mama." Mama sounded real upset and disappointed and Southern, but not as disappointed as me. The way Byron kept his head down and was smiling and saying "yes, ma'am" and "no, ma'am," that it looked like he surrendered before the first punch was thrown. Instead of King Kong and Godzilla, it was like King Kong and Bambi. Instead of Bobo Brazil and the Sheik, it was like Bobo Brazil and Captain Kangaroo. Instead of Dracula and Frankenstein, it was like Dracula and a giraffe. And Byron was all neck. He knew exactly what I was thinking. After Grandma Sands gave us directions, Byron looked at me sideways and said, "What the hell are you staring at?" I just shook my head. "What do you expect?" I asked. "You seen her. That bird's as old as dirt. She's so old, I bet she used to step over dinosaur turds. I ain't going to have her death on my hands." I knew that was a lie. It seemed like all the fight was out of Byron, and we'd only been in Birmingham for a couple minutes.